corporate corpse and Putin's tears. The celebration lasted exactly 47 minutes before reality crashed back in. Steele's sister, whose name turned out to be Natasha, which Richard found cosmically hilarious given the circumstances, was sitting wrapped in a Ukrainian army blanket, drinking tea that Abu Khalid had somehow produced, and assessing the warehouse with the calm, analytical eyes of someone who had clearly grown up watching her brother be a functional sociopath. "Your corporate corpse?" she said to Richard. "Not a question. In the flesh. Marcus talks about you constantly." She paused. "Not nicely." "I know. He used to print out your posts and circle the logical errors in red pen." Richard looked at Steele. "That's genuinely insane." Steele shrugged. It was a coping mechanism. "That's the most you thing I've ever heard." Natasha looked around the warehouse, the Ukrainians cleaning weapons, Abu Khalid organizing servers, Bandera staring at a tactical map like it owed him money, the whiteboards covered in Richard's chaotic strategic shorthand. "This is your operation?" she said. "Such as it is." She was quiet for a moment. "I have a law degree, Columbia. 3 years at DOJ before I decided I hated the government. 2 years at a white shoe firm before I decided I hated corporations. I've been doing human rights work for the last 4 years. She looked at him steadily. "The Russians grabbed me because I was getting too close to their financial networks in Eastern Europe, not because of Marcus. He doesn't know that yet." The warehouse went very quiet. Richard stared at her. "Say that again." "I was already investigating them. Marcus getting cold feet and trying to pull back was a coincidence. A convenient one for them. They used him as leverage, but the real reason they wanted me gone was the work I was doing on Kremlin-linked shell companies moving money through Baltic financial institutions." She sipped her tea. "I have 3 years of documentation, encrypted backups in 4 locations. They got me, but they didn't get the data." Richard turned slowly to look at Steele. Steele looked like he'd been hit by a bus. "You never told me." "You never asked what I was actually doing, Marcus. You were busy becoming the corporate liquidator." Bandera had walked over during this exchange and was now standing with his arms crossed, looking at Natasha with the focused intensity of a man recalibrating every assumption he'd made in the last 12 hours. "What level of networks?" he said quietly. "How high?" Natasha met his eyes. "High enough that 3 of the names in my files are in the building tonight through a different door." She paused. "Metaphorically. I mean they're connected to whoever sent those men." Bandera turned to Richard. Richard turned to Steele. Steele looked at his sister. "You," he said, "are a genuinely terrifying human being." "I grew up in the same house as you," she said. "I had to be." Richard stood at the whiteboard. It was 6:30 a.m. Everyone was running on fumes, adrenaline, and Abu Khalid's suspiciously good coffee. "Okay," he said, "let's reassess what we actually have." He started writing. "Assets. Hope Vault. Growing platform. Real economic framework. Rage Vault. Steele's platform now potentially flippable. Ukrainian intelligence contacts. Bandera's network. The general's agency data reluctantly provided. Jefe's goodwill and presumably some sicarios still in the parking lot. Natasha's 3 years of financial documentation. Abu Khalid's technical infrastructure. Richard's inexplicable ability to confuse armed men with HR jargon. Problems. Russians now know they failed the grab. They will escalate. Steele is burned as an asset on their side, which makes him a target. Red Redemption is live and gaining momentum, but needs protection. Hope Vault is growing fast enough to be genuinely threatening, which means it's now genuinely threatened. He stared at the board. "We had a guerrilla operation," he said. "Now we have something bigger than that, which means we need something we've never needed before." "What?" Abu Khalid said. "Legitimacy." Richard said it like it tasted bad. Real, boring, institutional legitimacy. The kind that makes it expensive and complicated to just make us disappear. Bandera nodded slowly. Cover. You need cover. Not cover. Infrastructure. There's a difference. Richard tapped the board. Cover is hiding. Infrastructure is building something big enough that taking it down requires a decision that gets made in a room full of lawyers and journalists and congressional staffers. We need to become the kind of problem that can't be solved quietly. Steele, who had been sitting in the corner doing something on his laptop, looked up. "I know how to do that," he said. Everyone looked at him. "I spent 5 years at Accenture teaching Fortune 500 companies how to become too structurally important to touch. How to embed themselves in regulatory frameworks, media ecosystems, and political relationships until removing them causes more damage than tolerating them." He paused. "I hated every minute of it, but I learned the playbook." Richard stared at him. "You're telling me you know how corporations make themselves untouchable?" "In detail. And you want to use that knowledge to make us untouchable." "I want to use it to make the platform untouchable, the parallel economy, Hope Vault. Make it structurally important to enough people that going after it is politically radioactive." Richard was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at Natasha. "Is he as smart as he thinks he is?" Natasha considered the question seriously. "He's smarter than he thinks he is," she said. "He just spent 5 years using it for the wrong things." Steele looked briefly hurt, then nodded in agreement. Richard exhaled. He walked over to his monster can, found it empty, crushed it, and tossed it into an already overflowing bin. "All right, new phase." He turned to the room. "Steele does the institutional architecture. Natasha runs the financial intelligence operation. We build an actual investigative unit around her data. Bandera and the Ukrainians handle security, and we figure out a way to make that relationship official enough to provide cover without anyone going to prison." He looked at Abu Khalid. "Tech infrastructure gets hardened, not startup hardened, war hardened." He looked at everyone. "And someone needs to call Jefe and tell him his sicarios can go home, and ask him, politely, if Jefe's Hidden Valley Revenge wants to be the first officially certified Hope Vault Premium brand. I want that ranch sauce on the front page of the marketplace by end of week." Abu Khalid raised his hand slightly. "What's the public story? What do we tell the audience?" Richard thought about that for a second. Then he pulled out his phone, hit record, and looked directly into the camera. No script, no prep, just the warehouse, the exhaustion, the wreckage of the last 18 hours visible in every line of his face. "Good morning, you pissed-off fuckers. Corporate Corpse here. Some things happened last night that I can't fully talk about yet. What I can tell you is this. They tried to shut us up. They failed. We're still here. We're bigger than we were yesterday, and we have new friends." He stepped back so the camera caught Steele in the background, looking disheveled and human, and nothing like the corporate liquidator. "Some of you are going to recognize that guy. Story's complicated. The short version is, he's ours now." He ended the stream. The clip got 12 million views before breakfast. Tucker Carlson went on air that afternoon looking visibly confused about which side he was supposed to be angry at, but he still managed to produce his signature idiotic giggle at the end. Megyn Kelly, with characteristic precision, looked into the camera and said, "I have it on good authority that Corporate Corpse still has a micropenis. However, I'm now told it's a patriotic micropenis, which changes things." Joe Rogan spent 3 hours on his podcast trying to figure out if Richard was based or not, and ended up accidentally agreeing with everything Hopefalt stood for while insisting he hadn't changed his position. And somewhere in Moscow, in a room full of screens, a man in an expensive suit watched the clip 4 times. Then he picked up a phone. "We underestimated him," he said. The voice on the other end said something brief. "No," the man replied, "not yet. Let's see what he builds first. Then we'll know exactly what to take." He put the phone down and looked at the screen. Richard's face, exhausted, defiant, unmistakably alive. Interesting. In the parking lot outside the warehouse, 3 of Jeffe's sicarios were playing cards on the hood of a rented Volkswagen Golf. One of them looked up at the sunrise. "Hey," he said to the others, "do you think the ranch sauce business is real? Because I have a brother-in-law with a distribution network in Germany." The other 2 considered this seriously. "Call him," one said. The ranch sauce business was going to be bigger than any of them expected. Within 3 weeks, Hefe's Hidden Valley Revenge went nuclear. It started as a meme. Then it became a movement. Europeans, still riding the high of the last World Cup, lost their minds over the sauce. TikTokers were doing the ranch challenge. French chefs were putting it on foie gras. German bratwurst stands started offering ranch und Wurst combos. Hefe, smelling blood in the water, went full corporate. He rebranded slightly to Corpse Valley Ranch, with Richard's reluctant blessing, and launched limited edition flavors: Putin's Tears, extra spicy; Billionaire Regret, smoky barbecue; H1B Replacement, mild because even revenge has tears. The sauce made so much money that Jeffe started quietly funding entire Hope Vault initiatives. American workers began getting microgrants to start small businesses. The parallel economy was suddenly very well capitalized. Meanwhile, Corpse and the team went full economic warfare. Using Natasha's financial intelligence, Bandera's Ukrainian contacts, and Steele's sleazy but brilliant corporate tactics, they started systematically shorting the Russian and Chinese economies in the most hilarious ways possible. They created trader shorts, a Hope Vault investment vehicle where users could pool money to short specific Russian oligarch companies and Chinese state-linked firms. Every time a new scandal dropped, thanks to Natasha's leaks, the shorts printed money. The crowning achievement came when they convinced a major American pension fund through sheer public pressure to divest from Chinese manufacturing and reinvest in American worker-owned cooperatives certified by Hope Vault. The move triggered a chain reaction. Stock prices of several key Chinese state companies tanked. Russian energy firms followed. Richard looked at the charts one morning and just started laughing. "We're making money by making billionaires cry. This is the most American shit I've ever seen." Back at the warehouse, things were getting wonderfully ridiculous. Hefe flew in for a strategy meeting and showed up wearing a custom suit with little ranch sauce bottle patterns on it. He and Bandera got into a heated but friendly argument over whether borscht or ranch went better with pelmeni. Natasha had taken over the intelligence unit and was terrifyingly efficient. Steele was actually useful for once, structuring deals and navigating regulatory loopholes. One afternoon, Abu Khalid walked up to Richard with a massive grin. "Boss, Corpse Valley Ranch just hit $1.4 billion in annual revenue. We're officially one of the fastest-growing consumer brands in Europe. And 40% of profits are being funneled into Hope Vault worker grants." Richard stared at him. "We're making bank selling ranch sauce and using it to fuck over the Russians and Chinese while helping American workers. This timeline is insane." He shook his head, smiling. "Tell Hefe to make a Freedom Ranch flavor. We're going all in." the Freedom Ranch flavor launch broke the internet before the product even existed.
Richard posted a 40-second clip from the warehouse. No production value. Just him, a whiteboard, and that specific energy of a man who had stopped being surprised by his own life.
Freedom Ranch. Coming soon. Tastes like winning. Burns like accountability. 0% of proceeds go to McKinsey, Goldman Sachs, or other corporate scumbags. 40 million views overnight. The next morning, Richard's phone wouldn't stop. He sat staring at it like it was a grenade someone had handed him without the pin. "There's a call from the White House," Abu Khalid said carefully. "Which one?" "The actual one, Pennsylvania Avenue. Tell them I'm busy." "Boss." "Tell them I'm in a strategy meeting." "With who?" Richard looked around the warehouse. Hefe was teaching Bandera how to properly apply ranch sauce to a breakfast burrito. Natasha was on 3 laptops simultaneously, looking like a woman who had found her natural habitat, and it happened to be economic warfare. Steele was on the phone with a Belgian investment fund, somehow convincing them to shift capital into American manufacturing co-ops, using vocabulary that should have been illegal. "Tell them I'm meeting with the board," Richard said. Which is technically true. The White House call came through eventually, because White House calls always do. It wasn't the president. It was a deputy chief of staff named Gerald, who had the specific energy of a man who had attended too many Ivy League schools and not enough actual life. "Mr. Corpse." "Richard, we're monitoring the situation with significant interest." "Which situation? We have several." "The Parallel Economy Initiative, the Traitor Shorts Vehicle, the Financial Pressure Campaign against Russian and Chinese state-linked assets, and the ranch sauce." "Especially the ranch sauce?" "The ranch sauce has become something of a diplomatic incident, yes. The French ambassador formally complained this morning, something about culinary sovereignty. Tell him Putin's tears is available in a beurre blanc reduction if he wants to get creative." There was a long silence on the line. "Richard, the administration would like to discuss alignment." Richard sat up straighter. "Alignment," he repeated. "Certain aspects of your operation are running parallel to national interests in ways that create opportunities for—" "Gerald." Richard's voice dropped to the register he used when a board meeting was about to go sideways. "Let me translate what you just said into English. You want to get credit for what we built without having done any of the work. You want to put a government logo on something that works specifically because it has no government logo. And you want me to sit in a room with people in suits and nod while they explain my own operation back to me using PowerPoint slides?" He paused. "Am I close?" Another silence. "Closer than I'd like," Gerald admitted. "Here's my alignment offer. You leave us alone. You don't regulate, don't investigate, don't assign us a liaison, don't invite us to the East Room. In exchange, we keep doing what we're doing, which is apparently working. The invisible hand of the market is currently slapping Russian oligarchs in the face with a ranch-soaked glove. You can quietly take credit in the midterms. Everyone wins." "That's not really how—" "Gerald, I spent 25 years in corporate America. I know exactly how bureaucracies work. You can either be the story of the government that got out of the way and let something real happen, or you can be the story of the government that tried to capture it and killed it. Pick one." "Call me back." He hung up. Bandera, who had been listening from across the warehouse while eating his ranch sauce burrito with the expression of a man experiencing a minor religious conversion, raised it in salute. "That was the most American thing I have ever witnessed." "I've been saving it," Richard said. Gerald called back in 4 hours. "We'll leave you alone," he said. "Provisionally." "Provisional is fine." Provisional is all any of us get. One request. I'm listening. The Freedom Ranch launch, the administration would like to not be mentioned in any way, for any reason. Richard frowned. Why would we mention... There's a photo circulating from the warehouse of the whiteboard. Richard thought about this. The whiteboard that says Phase 4, make the government irrelevant? That one, yes. Gerald, that's aspirational content. It's not a threat. It's a mission statement. It's been retweeted by 4 sitting senators. Which ones? That's the problem. 2 from each party, for completely different reasons. Richard started laughing and couldn't stop for a while. The Freedom Ranch launch happened on a Tuesday because Richard had learned from 25 years of corporate hell that Tuesdays were when you did things you wanted people to actually pay attention to. On Mondays, nobody was ready. Wednesdays felt like a hill. Friday was where news went to die. Tuesday was the day of reckoning. Jefe had flown in his entire family, not just cousins, actual family. His mother, Señora Esperanza, who was 72 years old, 4'11", wore a floral house dress and had the eyes of a woman who had survived things that would make Bandera pause. She tasted the Freedom Ranch formula, said something in rapid Spanish, and looked at Richard. She says, Jefe translated, that it needs more garlic. It has plenty of garlic. More Spanish, faster this time. She says American garlic is afraid of itself. Richard looked at Señora Esperanza. She looked back at him with absolute placid certainty. Fine, he said. More garlic. Natasha, who had been observing this exchange from her laptop station, made a note. Richard noticed. Are you documenting my ranch sauce argument? I document everything, she said. You never know what becomes evidence. Evidence of what? She smiled for the first time since arriving. It was a very good smile, and slightly alarming. I'll let you know when I find out. The launch numbers came in at midnight. Abu Khalid walked into the middle of the warehouse and just stood there for a moment, holding his tablet, with the expression of a man whose calculator had said something it shouldn't be able to say. Talk to me, Richard said. Freedom Ranch did 4.2 million units in pre-orders in 18 hours. Silence. The trader shorts against the 3 Russian energy firms we targeted, up 340% since Natasha's leak dropped this morning. More silence. Hope Vault crossed 1 million certified workers receiving grants or benefits from the parallel economy. Richard sat down. And, Abu Khalid continued, with the specific energy of a man saving the best for last, Forbes just published a piece. You're on the cover. He held up the tablet. The headline read, The Accidental Empire, How a Laid-Off Executive, a Reformed Narco, and a Jar of Ranch Sauce are rerouting the global economy. Richard Corporate Corpse Webb has done something economists said was impossible, made being a decent employer more profitable than being a predatory one. Wall Street is furious. Workers are buying his hot sauce. And nobody, including him, seems entirely sure how this happened. There was a photo. It was clearly taken without his knowledge. He was at the whiteboard, marker in hand, monster can in the other, looking like a man mid-thought about something that was either going to save the world or blow it up. In the background, you could see Bandera, Jefe, in the ranch bottle suit, Natasha at her laptops, Steele on his phone, Abu Khalid at the servers. It looked, Richard thought, like the worst possible pitch deck for the best possible company. He stared at it for a long time. Who talked to Forbes? Everyone looked at Steele. Steele raised both hands. It was controlled. I managed the narrative. They don't know a third of what's actually happening. Which third don't they know? The Ukrainian intelligence third? Good call. The backlash was magnificent. 3 of the 4 major accounting firms issued statements questioning the legality of trader shorts. These are the same firms that audited Enron, certified Theranos, and blessed every offshoring deal that killed your town. Read accordingly. A hedge fund manager named Trent, of course his name was Trent, went on CNBC and called Hope Vault economic terrorism with better branding. Richard responded with a 7-minute stream in which he read Trent's Wikipedia page aloud, noting with increasing cheerfulness that Trent had never held a job that wasn't given to him by someone who went to the same school as his father. Trent, he concluded, is a man whose entire existence is a legacy admission. God bless him. He's what happens when the system works exactly as designed. And I want you to remember Trent's face every time you use Hope Vault. Because Trent is why we exist. Trent trended on Twitter for 4 days. His fund lost 8% that week, partly from a trader short that Natasha had identified 3 weeks earlier, and nobody had connected until Trent made himself famous. Natasha, when told about the timing, simply nodded. "I know," she said. Richard looked at her. "Did you know it would work out this way?" She considered this with the seriousness of someone who did not traffic in comfortable lies. "I knew it was possible," she said. "I didn't know it would be this clean." "It's not clean, it's chaos." "Clean chaos," she said. "There's a difference." Hefe found Richard on the warehouse roof at 2 a.m., sitting in a camp chair looking at the city. He sat down next to him without asking, produced 2 beers, handed one over. They sat in silence for a while. "My mother wants to move the sauce operation to Texas," Hefe said finally. "She says the garlic supply chain is more reliable." Smart woman. "She is terrifying." He paused. "She also wants to meet Natasha. She says any woman who can make Russian oligarchs cry using a spreadsheet is worth knowing." Richard smiled. "I'll set it up." Another silence. Comfortable this time. "Corpse," Hefe said. "Do you know what you've built? A ranch sauce empire with an insurgency problem?" "No." Hefe was uncharacteristically serious. "You built the thing they always told you couldn't exist. The thing where doing right by people is also the most profitable play, where the workers and the product and the mission are all the same thing." He drank his beer. "In my old business, you survived by making sure nobody trusted anybody. That was the whole game. Nobody trusts you, nobody betrays you." He looked at Richard. "You built the opposite. An operation that works because everyone in it actually believes in it." Richard didn't say anything for a while. "It could still fall apart." "Yes," Hefe agreed. "Everything can. The question is what it's trying to be while it's standing." Below them, through the warehouse skylights, they could see the lights on, Natasha still working, Abu Khalid running diagnostics. 2 Ukrainians playing cards. Steele, asleep in a chair, his laptop still open to a regulatory filing he'd been optimizing. "My mother also says," Hefe added, "that you need to eat more. She's bringing tamales tomorrow." "I'm not going to argue with your mother." "Smart man." Hefe raised his beer. "To Freedom Ranch." Richard raised his. "To the weirdest business plan in history." They drank. Somewhere in Moscow, a man in an expensive suit was getting a very long briefing from a very nervous subordinate. Somewhere in Beijing, 3 state officials were looking at the same Hope Vault certified company list and making calls. Somewhere in Delaware, Trent was refreshing his fund's numbers and making a sound that didn't have a word for it in English, though several other languages had covered the concept. And on a rooftop in an American city that had more abandoned factories than functioning ones, 2 very unlikely friends finished their beers and went back to work. The morning was going to need them. It always did now. On a TikTok that would get 200 million views by the end of the month, a 19-year-old in Lyon, France, was doing the ranch challenge with a bottle of Putin's tears.
He looked into the camera, eyes watering from the heat, triumphant. C'est magnifique, he wheezed.
In the comments, someone had written, "This sauce was made by a cartel turned legitimate business funded by corporate revenge and Ukrainian intelligence, and I have never felt more alive knowing this." It had 847,000 likes. The internet, for once, had gotten something exactly right.